So all I've done here is opened up the image that I want to use and unlocked the background and duplicated the layer. Then I'm going to go to the pen tool and make sure it's on path. If you want to make your selection curved, when you select your next point, you want to drag your cursor so that it goes into the angle that you want it to go onto, and once you've made the selection you can change the angle of it by using the white dots that appear either side of it, and move the point through the blue dot. Here I'm selecting the part of the face that I want to move away from the face, from the main part of the face. Then what you want to do is to right click and press make selection. And then paste it onto a new layer. Then what you're going to do is to make sure you're selected on the original layer and use the paint bucket tool to fill the space that you've just taken away. And this will act as the inside of the head almost, to give that 3D effect. Then all I'm doing is adding a drop shadow. So I just came across an error there, so I just need to make sure that when you fill that shape that it's on a separate layer, and then you can add a drop shadow to it to make it look more realistic. So what I've realised here is that the inside section needs to be the darkest bit, as that's the bit that's going inwards, and then the drop shadow colour needs to be lighter. So I'm just changing that here. And then by clicking the eye icon, I'm making the selection that I did earlier on visible, and moving that away from the face, applying the same drop shadow, and instead of making it look like a section, I'm making it more blurred so that it looks more like a shadow instead of a section of the face, to make it appear more forward and therefore making the image look more 3D. Then I'm adding a new layer in between the top face and the gap shadow that I've made. Then I'm going onto the internet and finding objects that I'm going to put in between those to make it look like the flowers are coming out of the face. I've typed in flowers single to try to find a flower that's on its own, but also if you do that you're more likely to get one that has a plain background or has a blurred background, and that makes it much easier to separate from the background that it's originally on. So you want to save a selection of images. You might not use them all, but it's good to have a good selection and a good range to choose from. Once you've got those images, you're going to open them in Photoshop, and they will open as separate tabs at the top. And then what you can do is you need to select the flower and delete the background. You can do that in several ways. The option I'm doing there was object selection, or you can do quick selection, which selects the image, and then you want to go to select inverse to select everything that you didn't select in order to delete the background. Then select deselect to deselect the selection, and then select any other bits that may have been missed, and then just press delete. Then what you can do is drag that image from the layer into the main image, and it will appear as a separate layer in there. Then you want to do the same thing. This is just another way to select background. So if it's white, you can go to select color range, select the white background, and then press delete. More complex images are harder to select certain areas because it can be quite busy or like quite patterned. So that can make it harder. But there's ways to get around it. You just have to know which selection option you're going to use. You could use the eraser tool. I think I knew that when I was doing this, it was going to be, these leaves are going to be quite small. So I wasn't overly bothered about the edges being really detailed, which is lazy, but it got the job done. If you want to do this really in detail, you just want to zoom in all the way and make the brush smaller. And then to make it quicker, just make the brush a lot bigger. Then I'm just reducing the visibility of certain layers that I've just added in so I can focus on one. And then I'm arranging that layer so it's in the place that I want it to be. And then using the eraser tool to just get rid of some of the edges to make it look as though the plant is coming from inside the face, so that there's nothing overlapping the top section of that cutout. Then you can use things like the burn tool to make certain aspects darker, lighter. So by selecting the highlights and dragging that brush across it, I've just tried to dim down the white outline that there was. If you go to Edit Image Transform, you can change the size of it or the angle of it. So if you hover your mouse just outside of the corner, there'll be two arrows that appear. And if you just drag it from one side to the other, you can change the angle of each object. What you can also do is right click, press duplicate layer, and that will duplicate the image that you see in front of you. There's an example of using the transformation tool to change the angle of something. You can also flip it by just dragging one of the side toggles. Whenever you want to move something, you need to make sure that you're selected on the layer that it's on. Then all I'm doing from here is playing with and experimenting with the composition that I want and changing the objects. So there I've just made that flower higher up on the layer list, which means it's further forward than the ivy trail. So yeah, all I'm doing now is experimenting with the layout that I want, and you can do this with a range of objects, and you could also at the end repeat the process where you've cut out a section of the face and do it with other sections, or to cut out a section of the face that have already been cut out to make it a little bit more complex. That's up to you how far you take it. Then I can go to File, Export as JPEG to save it as an image, adjust the image quality to the highest it will go, and that will download it as a JPEG. If you wanted to download it so that you could edit it later, you want to go to File, Export as PSD, and then when you open that in Photoshop later, it will have all of the layers and everything there for you.